Hello, everybody. I'm Brian Hasenbuttle,
And I'm Mike Carlson.
and welcome to the View from the U.
Brian, big week of college football, rivalry week, a lot of huge games. There was that Iron Bowl, down in Alabama, but we'll touch on that later. That really wasn't an exciting finish, if you ask me. So let's start with some headlines. Why don't you get us started?
All right, first huge game: number 3 Ohio State versus number a billion Michigan. I mean, a Michigan team that has underachieved all season. They brought Ohio State to the Big House, and they gave them a run for their money. It ended on a failed 2-point conversion by Michigan. I think it was a great call, but Mike, break it down for us.
Brian, I want to first talk about the play before that play. And so Michigan lines up for a 2-point conversion. The Big House is getting fired up. It's a loud crowd there. I think there was over 100,000 people at that game, which is just an astonishing number. It's loud there. And then, of course, Urban Meyer decides to take a timeout. And you're thinking to yourself, why are you going to take a timeout? I mean, the 2-point conversion is going to happen either way. You're not achieving anything. There's there's nothing to gain from taking a timeout. But there is actually, Brian. By Urban Meyer doing that, he was able to recenter his defense, kind of drop a quick game plan for them. And I think that if he doesn't call that timeout on the first attempt, I think that Michigan gets the 2-point conversion, and we have a whole nother mess right now in the BCS, more than we already do. So you got to give Urban Meyer his credit there. I think that's a very underrated part of his coaching game. He's coached this Ohio State team great all year. Obviously, they're going to be in a good position to make a title run here down the stretch. But I want to give my props to Brady Hoke. I mean, you've had a terrible season. I mean, to be honest, Gardner has not played up to what he has, to what he could have been. Fitzgerald Toussaint is kind of in the lone bright spot in this team. He's been able to spearhead the rushing attack, and he's been a constant. But to be in the Big House against a dreaded rival and to get it down to one play, I mean, that's amazing considering Michigan's season.
Yeah, I mean that's the one thing that's really really good about Michigan football this year is because you have these rivalry games. I mean, granted you want to go to a Big Ten championship, but in this case you're in a situation where Ohio State is just set up to go into the Big House and just knock you right off the face of the earth and bring it down to one play. And that is a good sort of reassuring note to end on for Michigan, especially because of the horrible season they've had.
Yeah, I mean it's a bright spot. It's something you can take solace in, and if you're Michigan, you just got to rebuild. You got to work on your recruiting. You got to get ready for next year because Ohio State's going to be back, and they could be even better. They really could be.
Yeah. So another surprise, continuing on our headlines, is that the Pac-12 championship has been determined. Arizona State absolutely wailing on Arizona this week. I mean, it was a huge sum put up, but the Sun Devils put up 51 points against this Arizona team right after their big upset against Oregon. And I think that causes a problem for my Stanford Cardinal because, as I said before, Arizona State is not a team you want to play at home. Now that they're hosting the Pac-12 championship, they're in a great position to go to the Rose Bowl.
And Brian, you bring up a great point. I was kind of flipping back between that game and Notre Dame's game, but I sat next. We were at a friend's house, and they're both alumni of ASU. So of course, during the entire dinner table, I'm sitting next to the guy, and he's just talking my ear off about ASU. And I'm gonna tell you what, Brian. Here, I got some great intel for you. ASU is amazing at home. You already brought that up. They play inspired football at home. Taylor Kelly at home is unbeatable. I mean, Brian, he's had amazing football games at home. Hasn't played well on the road, but when you play this man at home, I mean, he's a Tom Brady, Peyton Manning like quarterback. I don't know what he's doing, with these home games. Maybe he just likes a little home cooking, but I mean that makes it very dangerous for Stanford. And the third thing I learned is that this Arizona State team is deadly. Brian, these guys will beat you any way they can. They beat U of A last night a million different ways. Kadeem Carey on 4th and 1 and 3rd and 1 could not get past this ASU front. And that was amazing. That really was. I mean, we saw Kadeem Carey, who's a running back, who's a guy who's going to be amazing. He's going to play on Sundays, for many years to come. He's a great guy. But to get stopped by the lowly ASU defense on 3rd and 1 and 4th and 1 when you would think those were automatic, I mean, that's astonishing. Brian, Stanford definitely has their work cut out for them.
Yeah, especially since Oregon did sort of play down to Arizona's level, and that really does show how poorly they've been playing because Arizona State, of course, is this really well-rounded team. Now that they're playing at home against Stanford for the Pac-12 championship, I'm actually leaning towards picking them to win in this case. But, I mean, look at this Arizona State team and just a marvelous season. I mean, you touched on Taylor Kelly, how well he's been playing at home. And if you want to talk about unstoppable, really, look no further than this Arizona State team. I mean, even on the road, they still have proved themselves. They've gotten wins against Oregon State and UCLA on the road, and I mean, this is a team that hasn't really gotten BCS, hasn't really been in the BCS conversation. Especially with that troubling call against Wisconsin and all that controversy early in the season. But I mean, these guys are here high in the BCS standings, and they're here to stay. So, Mike, our third and final headline.
Headline number 3, Brian. It's my boy, Jordan Lynch down at NIU. Little action for you. He and his fellow Huskies completed a perfect season. Brian, what are you going to do with this team in the BCS?
It's really difficult to judge what's going to come of this team, especially since what happened last year against Florida State. But I mean, I am a firm supporter of this team. They've been really consistent, especially since some of the other teams, UCF almost losing to South Florida, Louisville already having a one-loss season, Fresno State losing to San Jose State. This team has been they're like this little engine that could. They're the small conference team that just came in week after week and proved that they are the best. And I do want them to go to a BCS Bowl because they've just had that sort of unstoppable season. And while it may not have worked last year, I am a supporter of these guys getting another chance to step up against the big boys.
Brian, I could definitely see that. And I watched, Jordan Lynch play, and you think running quarterback, this guy, he's foofy. He's a Marcus Mariota. He'll just beat tacklers downfield with this speed. He'll outrun linebackers and DBs, but that's not the case. Brian, this guy is built like a truck. He will hit you as a quarterback, which is very refreshing in this day and age. I saw this guy initiate contact against a lot of linebackers, a lot of safeties, and you don't see that with a quarterback. I mean, Jordan Lynch is a great runner. He's a great passer, and I think this NIU team is better than the one they had last year. Obviously, you have a much more mature Jordan Lynch at the helm, and, Brian, this team looks unstoppable right now. They really do. And it'd be interesting, for fun. I mean, the last year, the BCS, why not match these guys up in a Fiesta Bowl or a Sugar Bowl or maybe even an Orange Bowl, just to see what happens. I mean, who knows what could happen. Florida State last year that they played, there was a good Florida State team, admittedly. E.J. Manuel was in his senior season. He's playing for a job on Sunday. He was playing for a job on Sunday at that point. So, it's going to be interesting down the road, and I'm more excited to see this guy, what he does in the NFL. I mean, the applications are endless with him. You could make him a wide receiver, throw him in the slot, make him a running back, or you could keep him as a quarterback. I could see him in a Chip Kelly type of offense, running a little bit of a spread option kind of attack, but he's a great quarterback. He's a great thrower. He's a great runner, Brian. It's going to be fascinating to see what this guy does.
Yeah, Mike, so on that note, take us to the Civil War. Fantastic game, Pac-12 North, Oregon State. Just give us a little smash. What happened, Mike?
Well, Brian, this was not expected. If you're Oregon, you have played terrible down the stretch. You really have. You lost to Stanford. You've lost to U of A. And, they have not been playing great football. They have not been playing that Oregon type of football that, we've seen under Chip Kelly and even this year. So, I mean, it was 36-35, which shocked me, Brian. You expect an Oregon team, they put up 40 at least every week. And to put up 36 and still let Oregon State hang with them, I mean, you can't have that happen, Brian. Marcus Mariota played terrible. I mean, he completed half of his passes. He was 17 of 34 for 3 touchdowns and 2 interceptions. If you want this guy to be in the NFL to make that jump, you cannot have games like that where you're 50% completion, 3 touchdowns, 2 interceptions. You cannot do that. It's, Oregon State's quarterback outdueled him. He had 2 touchdowns and 1 interception and, completed right around 60% of his passes. Brian, this is an Oregon team that the wheels have come off very quickly these last couple weeks.
Yeah. So one guy I'd like to spotlight on that is Brandon Cooks. I talked about him earlier when I covered Oregon State's game against Washington State. And, Mike, near the end of the game, this guy's been quite debatably one of the best receivers in the FBS this year. This guy's put up huge numbers, a lot of clutch receptions, but when it counted, late in the game, with Oregon leading by 1, he broke double coverage and had a pass hit him in the hands and go through. Now, if he caught it, that would have been a first down with the clock stopped that would have put Oregon State into field goal range with a chance to win. And that's just something that you can't see out of a big-time receiver like Brandon Cooks because, if you really do need to complete the season, you need to get those big catches all of the time.
Yeah, it's true. And I mean, you look at Cook's stats, Brian. He led the team in receptions. The next closest guy had 5, which was compared to Cook's 10, looks very small. I mean, 10 receptions for 110 yards, no touchdowns. He was kept out of the end zone very effectively by Oregon. But you bring up a great point. I mean, you got to finish if you're Oregon State. This is the Civil War. This is you're no longer playing for a bowl game or for something else. This is for fun right now. This is to say that you beat Oregon, that you dethroned the king of the Civil War. And, hats off to Cooks. He's a great wide receiver. Obviously, this guy gets targeted a ton in that Oregon State attack, but you got to catch it when it matters. I really think you do.
Yeah. So, my game this week was Texas Tech versus Texas. And, Mike, this is one that I did not see coming. I knew Texas Tech had their struggles. With their way they were sort of able to hang with Oklahoma State and put up big numbers against Baylor, I just could not have seen that they would just get annihilated by Texas. This year the BCS standings they're not really good for college football. When you want to see your Floridas in there, you want to see Texas at number 1 and then Texas Tech at 25 nipping at their heels at the end of the season. And that really hasn't been the case for either of this team. Texas was ranked 15th in week 2 and then just suffered some losses and dropped out of the conversation. Texas Tech climbed their way up to 10 in week 9 and then just blew it when it came to conference play. But I'm going to start with Texas Tech because they have had chronic quarterback problems throughout the season. All right, they started the season with Davis Webb. Sorry, checking my notes there. He played very well for the beginning of the season, but near the end of when he started to play, his quarterback rating was dipping below 70 in his last 3 starts, so they just trashed him, went to Baker Mayfield. He threw for 314 yards against Baylor and started this game, but he was having trouble, so they threw him out and went to Michael Brewer, who's just this brand new quarterback, and it was actually really his first real game, because he had some other games where maybe he threw 1 pass, but he actually stepped in and played for several drives in this game. But the main point of concern is Baker Mayfield for this. This is the guy who put up big numbers against Baylor, but Texas had his number. They blitzed time after time. They took advantage of this young freshman. They limited the big plays that Texas Tech is known for because they are that sort of dynamic passing offense like you have at Baylor. That's why Texas Tech Baylor was such a fun game because you expected 8 receptions of 70-plus yards for touchdowns. But and it's shown through the Texas Tech team. Before this game, they were averaging over 400 passing yards per game, first in the FBS. But the problem with Texas Tech is that they needed to get that first down boost. If they didn't get 8 yards on first down or something, they were immediately on their heels. Texas pounced and forced a punt, and that happened time and time again. And that's just something you can't do when playing a Big 12 opponent like Texas. But
yeah, and you bring up
Texas.
Hold on, I'm gonna. Oh, go ahead. Actually, no, you finish first.
All right.
And then I'll go. No worries.
All right. Texas, they had a lot more endurance than Texas Tech. Raiders, that's sort of their style. They come out firing, and they slowly sort of drifted away. But, the Texas Tech run game was awful. You can't win games when your leading rusher has 51 yards because you fake a punt and run that far. And they're such a one-dimensional team, and Texas really took advantage of that, especially when they can really knock them down with the pass rush. But Case McCoy, the Texas quarterback, he didn't play an exceptionally well game, but he didn't have to. Especially Malcolm Brown, Texas running back, he played so well, and the receivers played so well, and the defense played so well that, he could just have sort of an average night and still just absolutely demolish his Texas Tech team. So, really, the keys to the game, Texas Tech's mistakes, interceptions, turnovers, bad plays, that's why they lost, and Texas just pounding them with their continuing momentum is really how they won. So, Mike, what are your thoughts?
Brian, I almost jumped the gun on you there for a second because I'm just so outraged at, how far Texas has fallen. Since the days of Vince Young, and even when they got in the national championship game against Alabama a couple years ago, I'm just wondering what happened in Texas. I really am. You look at UT and you think, Vince Young beats USC, the glory days of, that administration when Mac Brown is a premier coach. But I'm wondering what happened. Where was the disconnect? Where did you end up falling off? And it astonishes me that something like that could happen because this is a Texas team. You should not have trouble with recruiting. You really shouldn't because you're Texas. You're the University of Texas. You're playing for a great head coach down there in Mac Brown. I mean, the location's great. The atmosphere is great. You're going to play quality opponents in Baylor every year. Baylor and a lot of those other teams in the Big 12. So I'm kind of wondering, Brian, what went wrong here in Texas? I don't know. Do you have any input?
I don't know. I mean, I think the big problem is they lost that big name quarterback. I mean, they had the. I mean, when you think of Texas, you know Vince Young, you know Colt McCoy. I think Case is coming in with huge shoes to fill, and he hasn't really stepped up. They're as as a normal Texas squad is, they're very athletic, but they're having trouble winning games, and that's just something you can't do at UT.
Yeah, I mean, you bring up a great point in that you lost that quarterback, you lost that star power, you lost the intrigue of Vince Young and the gunslinging ways of Colt McCoy. So it's going to be interesting, Brian, seeing how this Texas team goes into the offseason. There's been a lot of speculation that Nick Saban could end up in Texas. He's got after this week's Iron Bowl game. We're going to talk about that later. I don't want to spoil the surprise for our viewers because there's a big one in store if you didn't watch that game. But it's going to be interesting to see how they handle that. I mean, do you want to let go of a guy like Mac Brown and take a flyer on a Nick Saban or maybe even a Jack Del Rio, or do you want to keep Mac Brown because it has a lot to do with recruiting? I mean, if I'm a football player, I want to play for Mac Brown. I don't want to play for the new offensive coordinator who got promoted to head coach. You lose a little bit of that intrigue with Mac Brown, and I think the only way that you could upgrade at that position is if you go out and get a guy like Nick Saban.
Yeah, that's definitely true. I mean, if they're looking at the coaching market, of course, Lane Kiffin's available.
Yeah.
Lane Kiffin, Gene Chizik. Surprisingly, Florida is keeping their coach. Nebraska's keeping their coach, which is surprising. But Texas does have that expectation, and while there's still a slim chance they can win the Big 12, they have to. I think they can win if they beat Baylor and Oklahoma beats Oklahoma State, which again is slim. But they don't really deserve it this year based on how they've underachieved.
Yeah, I mean, for sure. And you look at a guy, you could look at, you bring up a great point, and, the head coach is Kevin Sumlin. Texas Tech, the crosstown rival, he was signed to a 6-year deal. I mean, the coaching market right now in college football is very slim. There's not a lot of great free agent coaches out there. There's not a lot of guys who are premier top-of-the-line coaches who don't have jobs. They're all somewhere, Brian. They really are. I mean, you look at Jack Del Rio right now. He's in the NFL coaching the Broncos until John Fox gets back. Someone was a guy who was looked at by a lot of different schools, but he's locked up in College Station for the next 6 years. It's really interesting, Brian. There's kind of a depletion of college coaches this year, so to speak.
Yeah. So, guys, the rivalry week analysis and more like rivalry week madness will continue next episode, which we should be putting up tomorrow. So until next time, I'm Brian Heisenbuttle.
And I'm Mike Carlson.
And we will see you.